Hi, I'm Femi Okay.
I'm Malika Bilal. This week marks the 10th anniversary of Al Jazeera English.
And we are at our headquarters in Doha. Same show, same hosts, different location. We are in Doha, Qatar.
Set is just a little bit different, a little bit tweaked. We're borrowing Inside Story set here in Doha headquarters.
And we're going to be here all week, so you will see guests from Qatar, you'll see guests from our Al Jazeera network all through this week. We're starting today talking about journalism. So for a decade, Al Jazeera English correspondents have been reporting from the front lines of international news, and they've covered some of the biggest stories.
They've also amplified the voices of people across the world. Our colleagues have braved war zones and unpredictable environments to get to the story.
So today we have brought together some senior correspondents from our network to talk about their work and also the journalism on Al Jazeera over the last 10 years.
Joining us on set, senior correspondent Huda Abdelhamid. Next to her, senior correspondent Hashim Ahlbarra. And joining us via Skype in Erbil, senior correspondent Mohammed Jamjoom. Welcome to the stream, everyone.
So if I could ask you, what defines Al Jazeera news coverage? What would you say? What is it that makes this network, your work, different from any other network that you could be watching? Hashim.
When I joined Al Jazeera about 11 years ago, before we went on air, a bunch of people from different continents, different places, different cultures, all debating how to move forward. Those meetings, you remember those meetings? They shaped the editorial agenda of Al Jazeera and they made it quite unique. Unprecedented. 2006, you would ask people, how would you expect Al Jazeera English to do when it goes on air? People divided about the channel. Now, 10 years later, I think many people would definitely say that it made a significant contribution.
So, Hoda, if you had to put your finger on what is it that's different about this network from other networks that you could be watching?
Well, I remember the day we launched. We had a correspondent in Darfur. We had stories from many different places that you don't see on other networks. I think what makes our strength is that we follow a story through, not just at the peak when it's the top story in the world, but we actually go back and revisit and we always return. So a location, a country, a story is always on our agenda with ups and downs depending on what's happening elsewhere. But it's not that we just dip in when there's global attention and then we dip out. No, we continue going there, deploying to those places. And I think that's what makes it different, because for us journalists it's also better by continuing to going and revisiting places. When something big happens, we maybe understand a little more where it comes from. What led to that?
I'm so glad you said that, because speaking of going back to places that you came from, we got this tweet. This is from A. Sharman, who writes, how did you get into reporting on the front lines in the first place? What experiences are necessary? So you mentioned you were here on launch day. You actually used to be the Iraq correspondent. You recently were back there 10 years later covering Mosul. What was that initial experience like, and then what's the difference 10 years later?
The difference is probably that the front lines are now much more dangerous than what they used to be. They were still dangerous, but I think I was very surprised by the level of danger of this Mosul offensive. I actually even joked to several of my colleagues of other networks that I met on the front line, and I said, well, from now on journalists will have to go to some military school or some special forces training before we'll be able to do that. The story itself is still the same, the suffering of the Iraqi people, this country that is torn apart and is not able to find any kind of way to make even baby steps to advance. So that remains the same, but I remember even this time I was looking at these Iraqis and I was like, it's been more than 10 years actually, because I was covering Iraq also before joining Al Jazeera English, and I was like, your life has not improved 1 inch. And sometimes you feel, well, how am I going to explain that over and over again? It's like, well, there's only one way. It's just the same way. But this is the reality.
Let me show you Mohammed's Instagram page. I follow this pretty much every day. This is some pictures that he's just taken recently. This one is incredibly striking. I'm just going to click through a couple of them, because not only is he reporting in the field, he's taking pictures in the field, he's tweeting in the field. For you, Mohammed, when you come to a story as an Al Jazeera correspondent, what is it that you're bringing to the story that you wouldn't have brought to any other network that you may have worked at?
Well, one of the things that I love about working at Al Jazeera English, and this is going to kind of expand on some of the stuff that Huda was saying. For example, Iraq. You know, we've had multiple teams here since the Mosul offensive started, and so oftentimes when you'll have one team covering the front lines, this is the battle for Mosul, you'll have another team that's covering the humanitarian side, because there is this dire, escalating humanitarian crisis that is unfolding here. And it's not just now. The issue of the displaced, this is something that's been going on in Iraq for around 13 years now. I mean, there's about 3.1 million people that are displaced in Iraq. And so for me to be able to work for a network that concentrates so much on that aspect of the story, I think is phenomenal. I want to always bring that to the viewers, not just through the TV pieces, but also through the pictures on Instagram, also through the tweets, whether we do a Snapchat from an IDP camp or an Instagram story. For me, all of that is just a way to add to what's going on here, to what's unfolding. And the fact that this network allows me to do it, unlike other networks that I've worked for, that's something that I'm just very proud of.
Let me show you what it looks like out in the field. This is from Al Jazeera's Facebook page here, and it takes you into the battle for Mosul and what some of our reporters have been doing in the last couple of weeks. Have a look.
The director tells us that people are arriving here on a daily basis,
troops
but they're
are
not
pushing from the east and south of the city, but they still have a long way.
That's before 3 days his last position.
Just setting up. We've got about 3 minutes to go before live. You good to go, Steph? Fantastic. So we've just cabled up to be live from near the front lines. We can either use cables or wireless camera systems. We're currently about 20 kilometers away from Mosul. So this is our live vehicle. We're up and down the front lines with these every day. We obviously carry on generators to power everything. There's a satellite connection back to Doha studios.
So I love that video, and I know I'm not the only one, because it actually shows you how the sausage is made, you know, to put it. So this is a question we got from Harvey, who wants to know a little bit more of that process. Harvey says, how do you maintain your composure while reporting live when situations take a turn for the worse? Hashim, I'm going to direct this to you. I know just one of the many examples. I'm sure you have many that you could probably pull out of your hat there, but you were in Yemen when the Houthis took over. What was that like? And is that one that immediately comes to mind when you think about situations kind of turning when you didn't expect them to turn?
You know, it's just you happen to be in those places, and there's such extraordinary situations, and then you have to think about your next move. I wouldn't say that we do go to those places with pre-planned actions or how to move forward. When I was there in Yemen, the Houthis took over. It was really very chaotic situation.
Did you see it coming?
Yeah. Our sources were telling us that it was going to be just a matter of 24 hours before they overrun the capital. The problem that we were literally confined to a hotel. We couldn't leave. And after some time, when we took the decision to leave the capital, Sana'a, we happened to be taken by a driver to the wrong place. It was an area where the fighting was flaring up, and we could see the fighters from both sides just about 10, 15 meters exchanging, firing at each other. It was really a very delicate situation. But you know, I've been doing this for 18 years. I really don't have an answer, clear answer about how to tackle those situations, except that if you're really passionate about journalism or about what you do, that could be your, could give you more strength to deal with those situations.
I think if you're not passionate, it's impossible to do this job in the first place. But the question was how we keep our composure.
Yeah.
Actually, you'd be surprised at what happens before sometimes. There's complete panic, whether it's because you have some technical issues or because, I mean, we are human beings. We are not bulletproof, and it's sometimes very scary. So sometimes me, I get very scared. I said, okay, it's just 2-3 minutes. Hold it tight.
Hold it together. So if I say Libya Escape 2011 to you, and I play that clip, what do we need to know before we see that clip?
You need to know before we see that clip that we went too far.
All right.
We saw an empty road. We saw what seemed like rebels because they had all the props of the rebels. The flag, those pickup trucks that were mounted in quite...
So exciting scenery, looked like a great shot.
So we thought we were still behind rebel lines.
You thought, so this is what Hoda and her team thought. This is what happened. Have a look.
We have been going back and forth on this road throughout the day as opposition fighters kept on advancing and retreating as they came under heavy fire by Gaddafi forces. You might still hear in the background, this is some of the fighting still going on at the moment. Rebels have been retreating very speedily towards the east of the country. They do say that they have been come under attack. What? Yalla. Gaddafi forces, we have to... Quickly.
All right, you hear the panic there. Mohammed, if you've been in a situation where you are freaking out on the inside,
oh,
but not
absolutely.
showing it.
I mean, the other day we were just on the outskirts, on the southern edge of Bashiqa, and there were still firefights going on between Peshmerga and ISIL fighters in the town. And there were many times when the Peshmerga forces would tell us that we could go further, but we were playing it as smart as we could, knowing that there was more fighting going on in that town that maybe some would want us to believe. At one point we heard, oh, everything's fine, the city's been cleared of ISIL fighters, and then 10 minutes later there was an airstrike. Yeah, those are days where you certainly want to deliver the news and you certainly want to be in front of the camera, but you're hearing gunfire, there's airstrikes going on. Yeah, it's not a pleasant situation. You certainly want to deliver for the network and for the viewers, but you also want to make sure that the team is safe, and it can certainly be scary, yeah.
I think you have to take all the information everybody tells you, but you have to make your own assessment.
Yeah.
Among us as a team, we have to make our own assessment.
Yeah.
Because, as Mohammed was just saying, the people fighting, they're fighting for a cause, they get gains, they get really happy, they want to show it, but you should have a bit more cool-headed. You're not part of the story. So you sort of also have to make your own assessment and maybe sometimes take a back step, study the situation a little bit, and then decide to go further. Otherwise, you can find yourself in situations because what you haven't seen...
That was scary, but even hearing that, I actually am scared hearing you say that.
Because what you haven't seen is that behind the camera, there was our cameraman, Raed, and there was Suleiman, who is our Libyan producer, and they were making signs like, come on, and I couldn't understand. And then they started basically nearly jumping. And then I turned and I saw this column of cars flanking from the desert. Wow. And they were wearing green bandanas. This is the way the Gaddafi forces would recognize each other. And then we realized, okay, it's either we... And actually, Raed was brilliant. He just threw the tripod, the camera, all the equipment, into the van, and we just left. It was quite...
You know, hearing you, Hoda and Mohammed, talk about assessing the safety of yourself, but also wanting to tell the story, it reminds me of this tweet. We actually got a couple on this theme here. This is Grace, who says, do you ever feel the urge to help victims of whatever catastrophe they're covering? Another person writes into us saying, have you ever come across those emotional moments when you see someone in pain and you wish things could get better? Hashem, of course, as a journalist, you're kind of a bystander. You're telling the story, but then, of course, in front of you are people dealing with the effects of whatever the story is you're telling. How do you grapple with that?
I think every journalist you'd ask the same question would definitely tell you that he has been at a certain time haunted by events or by stories during his coverage, just to remember. I think shattered lives, innocent people who have been badly affected by conflict and wars, the impressive looks of children in Yemen, Afghanistan, Iraq, Sub-Saharan Africa, who are absolutely unaware of what's going around and when the world is moving to a dangerous direction. Those are things that come back haunting you from time to time. But you know, by the end of the day, you always ask yourself the question, is it worth it? And then the answer comes on the spot.
I'm sure there's many people you wonder what happened to them.
Of
I mean,
course.
there's so many people you interview. You keep in touch with some of them, but you can't with everybody. And many times you look at a package and you go, what happened to that person? I mean, one of the most haunting things for me, which is actually wasn't in a war zone, it was in the middle of the sea. It was these migrants coming from Libya. And we'd been sailing on this great state-of-the-art Navy ship from the Italian Navy. And then all of a sudden, you saw this small dot in the sea just becoming bigger and bigger. And 120 people stranded in a sinking rubber dinghy. None of them knew how to swim. And there is not one, I mean, there's no land in sight. You are going nowhere. And it was really a lot to take in. Because basically, you're like, how did you come here? You know, and that was very shocking. Even though it wasn't the most violent, it wasn't the most, but because it was so calm. And you had this boat of misery in the middle of beautiful sea with beautiful weather. It was shocking for me.
Mohammed, there's a story that stood out for us as a team, and I know it stood out for you, which was covering the refugee crisis, which the network did constantly, went back and revisited again and again and again. But it was a little interview you did where you were smiling and the interviewees were smiling, but yet it was a tragic situation. It was all around clowns. What do we need to know before we play this clip?
So we went to a pier in Mytilene on the island of Lesbos in Greece, and we were following a volunteer group of clowns called Clowns Without Borders that were going to try to give some levity to kids, refugees that really needed it. And we wanted to be able to show how traumatized children had been by this migrant and refugee crisis. And this is what we saw. I'll tell you more about it after you show the clip.
All right, this is November 2015, so just a year ago. Have a look.
Clowns Without Borders put on as many as 6 shows a day, trying to spread as much cheer as they can in camps all over the island. 9-year-old Noor may have escaped Iraq with her family, but she's not been able to escape a reality that seems to get harsher by the hour. Until today.
So they're telling me that they had so much fun and they danced and they got here 3 days ago and this is the first time that they smiled since they got here.
So it's so rare to see you smiling when you're reporting. There was just this real joy when you were there and the kids were smiling, but yet the basic story was a horrible story, Mohammed.
Yeah, and I have to say that was, I guess I can expand on something that both Huda and Hashim touched on. I mean, for me, when you see emotional trauma, when you're confronted with that, it's much harder than physical trauma. And the team that day, I was with Kavita Sharma, the producer, and Jill Holton, the cameraman. And very soon after we saw the clowns arrive, and to see those kids get so much joy after having been deprived for so long, I think we all had to, at different parts of that day, go off and just try to cry a little bit and deal with the emotion. It was extremely hard. And yes, you have the joy of the moment which we reacted to, and you saw it on our faces and the faces of the children. But at the same time, we were trying to show our viewers how much trauma these kids have dealt with, what a dearth of joy and laughter they have in their lives, and just give a different sort of aspect to the refugee crisis and how it has traumatized a generation of children. It was extremely hard. It was a real emotional toll, but nothing that we dealt with anything compared to what those kids dealt with. And yeah, to hear a child tell you at that age that that's the first time that she's laughed or smiled in 3 weeks it's a horrifying thing to hear.
Let me show you something here which looks almost impossible on my laptop. This is from Al Jazeera. 1 minute Yemen. How is that even possible? Hashim. How? I don't know. I watched it. I was like, how did he do that? Talking about underreported stories. I mean, this is your beat. You know Yemen inside out. Where are we today?
More divided than ever, more uncertainty than ever. I'm pretty sure that Yemen is never going to be the same again, and the international community has failed the Yemenis. And you look at the situation. Destruction, civilians being killed, warlords, AQAP and ISIL taking advantage in the southern part of the country. The international community and the UN in particular don't seem to be willing to come up with a solution. And it's the Yemenis who suffer. Very fascinating place. One of the most charming people you would encounter. It's really, the irony in Yemen is when you go there, when you land in, every single person has a weapon. But then you don't feel the stress that you would feel in different places, because the Yemenis are really amazing people. And I'm looking forward to go back to Yemen, because we haven't been able to go to Yemen over the last 24 months. Looking forward to go back to Yemen and see it more prosperous than ever.
Those restrictions, the reasons you can't go to Yemen, and the reason journalists can't go to a lot of places, Syria being another one of them, often leads to questions like this, or statements like this. This is a tweet we got from Maya Resh, who says, "Journalists show only one side of the story. I have personally witnessed this. Be fair in your reporting." Is this something that you all, Mohammed, Hashim, Huda, is this something you get, and how do you respond to it?
All the time. And I think there's two issues, a personal point of view. Maybe sometimes people don't understand that we are reporting from the place where we are. So this is what I'm seeing, this is what I know, and this is what people here told me about. There's also the issue that sometimes you don't get access to other areas. You don't get the permit to film, you don't get the visa to get into the country. So there's also these restrictions that are not really our fault, but we don't explain all the time. So you have these two things, but these are, I think, the two main points. I don't know if you guys agree with me.
Mohammed, what do you think?
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. We want to be in those places. It's very frustrating for us. I'm sure Huda and Hashim would agree when you're reporting on a story like Syria or a story like Yemen. And by the way, Yemen was the first place I ever met Hashim in person, was outside of Sana'a University a few years back. But we all want to be back in these places, but you can't because of the restrictions. We're trying as hard as we can. Take, for example, we've all done stints in Gaziantep on Turkey's border with Syria, trying as much as we can to tell the story that's going on in Syria. But we all have to go out of our way when we're doing live reports, or we're relying on footage from inside that might be on YouTube to point out to the viewers that we're not there. So it makes it doubly hard. But we still get hit with these charges from people that we're being biased or we're one-sided. Look, that just comes with the job. But yeah, when you're dealing with reporting on an area that you can no longer get to, it makes it very, very challenging.
By the way, speaking of Yemen, when we met with Mohammed, we were told then by the advisor of the president, you have to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning for an interview for a press conference by the president. We arrived on time. Someone asked first question. The president was really mad at that journalist, and then he said, the press conference is over, and then he left. One of those times.
So many more stories to be taken from our correspondents, and you can hear more from them. We're taking them online to our online post show at stream.aljazeera.com. If you want to talk to them, hashtag AJStream, and you go online, and then your questions can actually go to them, and they will answer them. Malika.
You're right. We're already getting some that I'm going to bring up in the post show, so stay tuned for that. There's some spicy ones.
Okay, I like spicy. On the next show from Doha, the stream hosts an open editorial meeting between community members and a few of Al Jazeera's very senior editors.
You can start sharing which stories matter to you by tweeting in using that hashtag open editorial. We'll see you online.
Thanks for watching. everybody. Welcome back to the stream. As Al Jazeera marks its 10th anniversary, we've gathered a round table of our correspondents to reflect on some of the biggest headlines of today. I'm going to get right back to that conversation. Mohammed, you're actually working right now. I was just looking at one of your stories just online. Let me just see. Okay, displaced Iraqi mum asks who would listen to our voices, even if we talk, who would listen? I mean, that's a story that you've just filed. What's the next story that you're working on?
We are planning to do more coverage of the humanitarian crisis here. So tomorrow we're going to try to go to one of the camps that's further north from us and talk to a family of children, some siblings who've been orphaned by the fighting, right. And try to also showcase another story, another aspect of this, which is how kids must get psychological counseling and how some aid groups are trying to give it, or trying to set that up for them. That's what we're working on for tomorrow. But to touch on something we mentioned just a few minutes ago, it depends on access. It's much more difficult now to get access to some of these internally displacement camps. So all will depend on what happens in the morning, even though we've been trying to set up this story for a good 4 or 5 days now.
Tell us something that the general public do not know about your job, that they would be shocked if they realized. We're on the internet, so we can be shocking. Hashim, what would surprise the general public if they knew something that you did in the line of duty? Let me show you something here. Let me. It's late. No management is watching. Let me show you something here on my laptop. Let me help you out here. Sure. This is. I remember this package because I think on Al Jazeera we do there's so many terrible stories in the world that we want to shine light on. That sometimes there's the joy of the world that we don't have time. We move on by. Somebody else can do joy. But this, daggers in Yemen. This is a story that I loved. This is a story that your dagger is out there, and it says, you said in the story, show me your dagger and I will show you the man. So if we saw your dagger, what would we see about you?
Well, basically the reason why we did this report is just basically people would think that when they see pictures of Yemenis with daggers, they would think this a sign that we're talking about a society where daggers are part of their life. In fact, it's just a symbol of status for the Yemenis, and they enjoy it because it's been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's part of the legacy of the Yemenis.
Let me help you out with that question. People would be shocked if they knew that you were an anthropologist, right?
Yes, part of my.
I didn't know. We taught Hoda something. That's a first.
Part of my master's degree, I had to translate a book by a prominent American anthropologist, Edward Hall, Silent Language, the impact of nonverbal communication on people. So that's when I fell in love with anthropology. And by the way, anthropology helps you a lot deal with different situations, like convincing people to give you access, understanding differences, and coming about appreciating
differences. Give me an example, because this sounds unusual. How does anthropology help you gain access?
I remember in Yemen, we had to convince a top army general to allow us go and film fighting against AQAP in Zinjibar, that's in the south of Yemen. It took us some time to convince him. He said, no, 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 no. But then we said, let's change tactic. And then we decided to go on a very casual context, which is basically when Yemenis chew qat. And when they chew the qat, they communicate with you and they relate to you. And then he said at the end, you know what, you guys from Al Jazeera, you like fireworks. Tomorrow I'll show you fireworks. We went with the guy the next day and he gave us an incredibly exclusive access to the war zone, except that his lieutenant made a massive mistake. He told us this is a safe area. Well, AQAP was about just 35 meters from the area. We got shot at and then we had to leave the area. We flew the day after and the general was killed by AQAP.
You know, it's stories like that that explain why we're getting such kind of congratulatory tweets online from people who say you all are doing a phenomenal job. In particular, this one, Mohammed, this is from Mohammed. I'm going to give it to you, Huda. He says, salute the team on the ground. The female reporters are absolutely phenomenal. That leads us to a video comment we got from another female reporter. She's not with Al Jazeera, but she's in our community and sent us a video comment about her experiences and some of the troubles she faces. This is Beth Murphy, and this is what she told us.
We've heard more stories of female journalists being raped. And of course, that has a huge impact on the way I think about the work and the way I do my job and the places, I'm willing to travel. In Afghanistan, for example, I used to travel a bit more freely. Now I very much go only exactly where I have to be and only exactly back to where I need to get back to. And I don't love that, but again, I think it's necessary, and I think it's the safe way to approach the job.
Are there different approaches you take with that in mind, or do you not even think about it?
I tend not to think about these things, otherwise I'll just lock myself in my hotel room and then wait for the end of the assignment. But I take care about how I dress, sometimes how I speak. I try to figure out the place where I am. I try to soak in the culture, not blend into it completely, because I don't think the person in front of me would buy it. But I try as much as possible to watch out, not to be too flashy, or not to be, not to speak with a loud voice, which is very complicated for me, but I try.
Can you just say that again, Hoda? Because how do you even do that? I mean, out of all the things you said, that's the most unbelievable. What, you go undercover with a quiet voice?
I just, like, for example, in Afghanistan, we were driving once from the north, Kunduz, all the way to Kabul, and it took hours. And there were a lot of checkpoints, and then we would stop to get a tea, and I had to always sit in the car. But each time there was a checkpoint, I just looked down like this and tried not to laugh, because I was getting the giggles. Because the cameraman was telling me as we were approaching the checkpoint, now lower your eyes, shut up, don't show them that you have a loud voice, So that kind of thing, but you just go through it. No, on a more serious note, there are places where it was quite scary. I remember in Libya, one driver was telling us, we had that same night of that video you showed earlier, we had to sleep halfway between Benghazi and the place where we were. And there is one driver who kept on telling me, if we get caught, you're the only one who's going to get raped, you're the woman, you're the one who get raped. And it really freaked me out. To the point that I just told everybody, I don't want to speak to this guy for a little bit until it calms down. I went on with my job next day, and I never felt at any stage that I was really threatened, but just the fact that he repeated it all day long. In Egypt, it was also a little bit scary, because some of our colleagues, not at Al Jazeera, but in other networks, had been harassed, sometimes in quite a vicious way.
How do you prepare for that? Do you have martial arts skills? I mean, what do you have where you think about it? Every now and again, I go on a course to revisit how I hurt somebody with a little bit of pressure. That's helpful in the stream office. No, I'm kidding. It's actually helpful in the field, because I need to be able to remember how to do it if I get into trouble.
Listen, we do get training about what to do and not to do in hostile environment. I always wonder if, when that happens, if I'll remember any of it or not. I'm told I will. It will come all flowing in my head. I hope I will never be faced with the situation in the first place. Just try to avoid it. Sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but for me, sometimes it's a bit annoying, because you might want to go a bit further in the story, but then you're a bit worried, so you say, okay, no, I'm not going to do that, and then you go back to your hotel room and you say, oh, damn, why didn't I do it? So you're always torn. It's always a continuous assessment throughout the day, right? Hour by hour. It's not like you have a plan in the morning and that's it.
Sure. Mohammed, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in there and pick up on something Huda was saying, too. One of the sensitivities also that we deal with is, well, I mean, feel free to disagree with me, but one of the sensitivities that I deal with reporting in this region is when it comes to language. I'm an Arabic speaker as well, and sometimes, depending on who you're speaking with, the accent of the Arabic that you're speaking, it can be good or it can be bad, because it can bring in a lot of conceptions about what kind
Just as he was about to say something great. All right.
Sensitivity.
Mohammed, you
Go ahead.
froze. You said just as, and then we didn't hear you. So repeat that last sentence you just said, because you just froze at the juicy
I was
bit.
just saying that the language, even though we speak Arabic, one of the things that I deal with is depending on which country you're in and what accent you have, that can add to the sensitivity when it comes to the story.
Right,
That's all.
Gotcha. All right. Malika.
Okay, so we're talking about sensitivity. I promise spicy. This is a tweet we got. Hashim, I'll direct it to you, but anyone can jump in here. This is from Jim, and he says, how do you maintain editorial objectivity given that in the case of, he says Yemen, but I would say anywhere, ownership, the allegiances of the place that you work might be a party to that conflict, might be involved in that conflict. How do you approach that? What do you do about that?
Basically, for the last 10 years that I've been working with Al Jazeera English, I've never witnessed personally any case of interference into what I do. Basically, a senior correspondent who operates in the field is someone who plays a significant role in shaping the editorial agenda because of his experience in that particular place, the vast network of contacts that he has with the people. So he has some sense of independence in gathering all those elements and putting them together on air. I've never felt at a certain point that that my integrity has been compromised. To the contrary, I have very wide leeway to operate independently and in a very balanced way.
And also, we're a channel that does a lot of people's story. So regardless of anything, people's story is people's story. Their hardship, their misery, that's a reality no one can deny, no matter what. But, I mean, I haven't felt also any kind of interference. We're field people. We try to depict what we see. So this is what we see. You cannot change it, no matter what. And if we try to change it with words, well, look at what the picture's saying. So, you know, and that's, we are a channel, we say that we're the voice of the voiceless, meaning that we're the voice of the people. Those who are, let's say, suffer the consequences of the story. So those voices are regardless from anything, anyway.
Mohammed, when you say that you work at Al Jazeera, what is the reaction that you most often get?
Mostly I hear positive reaction. People, the viewers that we have, they really like the fact that they hear the human story on Al Jazeera. That's one of the mottos of the network, so you hear it a lot on our airwaves. But the fact that we have, even this week, 2 teams here in Erbil, and, you know, on one day, one team will be doing, you know, the military side of the story, the other team will be doing the humanitarian side of the story. The fact that there's resources dedicated to telling parts of the story and ensuring that voices of normal, average people show up on our air to talk about how they are affected by conflict and war and so many other horrible things, I think that really distinguishes us. There's a diversity of voices on our air, and we always push to make sure we get those voices on the air, and that to me is the positive reaction that I hear most from viewers that watch the channel.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being part of this conversation. I've really enjoyed your company. Hopefully we can do it again.
Hopefully, very soon.
At our 20th anniversary, Malika and I will have arthritis on some newfangled piece of equipment. 2 old ladies sitting here doing the stream.
Oh, it's going to be on a beach by then.
Thank you so much, everybody. Hoda and Hashim and Mohammed, and to our online community as well. Oh, okay, day 1. 3 more to go in Doha. Thank you so much, everybody, for being part of this program. We will see you online on our many platforms, and see you for tomorrow's show, where we will have an open editorial, your views on what we should be doing on the air. Thanks so much. Take care.